The biosynthetic contacts were itching again, which meant I'd been wearing them too long. 3 years of pretending to be an Altarian researcher had taught me that the most dangerous moments weren't during high-stakes negotiations or covert intelligence gathering, they were during routine lab work when your equipment decided to remind you that you were living a lie 24 hours a day. "Dr. Kethani," came a voice behind me, using the false identity I'd worn so long it almost felt real. "The crystalline samples from Theta-7 are ready for spectral analysis." I turned to see Dr. Liana Voss approaching with her usual scientific enthusiasm. She was brilliant, dedicated, and unfortunately for my peace of mind, increasingly observant. Her pointed ears, characteristic of the Zephyrian species, were decorated with the subtle silver threading that indicated her high academic rank, and her violet eyes held the kind of intelligence that made deception both necessary and dangerous. "Excellent, Dr. Voss," I replied, making sure to maintain the slightly nasal vocal patterns that were part of my Altarian persona. "Have you noticed any unusual resonance frequencies in the preliminary scans?" "Actually, yes. The harmonic patterns suggest these crystals might be naturally occurring quantum processors. If we're right about this, it could revolutionize energy storage across the consortium." I nodded, genuinely impressed despite the circumstances. Liana's research was pushing the boundaries of what the Zephyrian Trade Consortium believed possible, though it was still several generations behind what humanity had achieved in our hidden laboratories. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was here gathering intelligence on technologies that Earth had already surpassed while pretending to be excited by their primitive applications. "Dr. Kethani, are you feeling well? You look strained." "Just tired," I lied smoothly. "These long research cycles are more demanding than I expected." The truth was that maintaining multiple biosynthetic disguises while conducting advanced scientific work was exhausting on every level. The contact lenses that gave me the vertical pupils common to most consortium species, the subcutaneous implants that altered my facial structure, the hormonal regulators that changed my scent signature, all of it took constant monitoring and adjustment. "Perhaps you should take a break," Liana suggested. "We could review the data together over dinner. I've been curious about Altarian cuisine, and you never talk about your homeworld." "Because it doesn't exist," I thought. At least not the version I'd created for my cover identity. "That's kind of you, but I prefer to focus on the work while we're here. These discoveries are too important to delay." Liana's expression shifted slightly, and I caught something that might have been disappointment. Over the past few months, our professional relationship had developed an undertone that I couldn't afford to acknowledge. She was attractive, intelligent, and genuinely passionate about science in a way that reminded me why I'd become a researcher before I'd become a spy. "Of course," she said. "The work comes first." We spent the next few hours analyzing the crystal samples, and I found myself genuinely engaged in the research despite my ulterior motives. The quantum processing properties were fascinating, even if they were applications humanity had been using for decades. Watching Liana work was like seeing someone discover fire while you carried a plasma torch. "Dr. Kethani, look at this resonance pattern," Liana called excitedly. "If I'm reading this correctly, these crystals aren't just processors, they're capable of multidimensional calculations." I moved to look over her shoulder, and immediately regretted it. The proximity made my biosynthetic system spike with stress responses that were distinctly human, not Altarian. Liana's scent was doing things to my chemistry that my disguises couldn't completely mask. "Fascinating," I managed, focusing on the data readouts instead of the way her hair caught the laboratory lighting. "It's more than fascinating, it's revolutionary. Dr. Kethani, if we can understand how these crystals process information across dimensional boundaries, we could develop communication systems that work instantly across galactic distances." Again, humanity had been using quantum entanglement communication for 30 years, but I couldn't exactly mention that. "The implications are certainly significant," I agreed. "Significant? This could change everything." Liana turned to face me, her excitement making her eyes bright. "Don't you see what this means for exploration, for connecting isolated worlds, for—" She stopped mid-sentence, staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Dr. Kethani, your eyes." My blood went cold. I'd been so focused on her enthusiasm that I hadn't noticed the warning tingle that meant my contact lenses were failing. 3 years of perfect maintenance, and they chose now to malfunction. What about my eyes? They're different. The pupils, they're. Lyanna stepped closer, studying my face with the same intensity she applied to her research. They're round. I could feel the contacts dissolving, the biosynthetic material finally breaking down after too many hours of wear. My human eyes, with their round pupils and distinctly Terran iris patterns, were becoming visible. I should explain, I started, but Lyanna was already backing away. "You're not Altarian," she whispered. "Those aren't Altarian eyes. I've never seen eyes like that." The laboratory suddenly felt very small and very quiet. In the distance, I could hear the hum of the research station's life support systems and the soft chime of analysis equipment finishing its cycles. Normal sounds of a normal day that was about to become anything but normal. "Lyanna, I need you to listen to me very carefully. What species are you?" Her voice was steady, but I could see the tension in her posture, the way she positioned herself near the emergency communication panel. "I'm human." The word hung in the air between us like an admission of guilt. In the consortium's records, humans were listed as a primitive species from an unremarkable world in the outer spiral, barely past their industrial age and centuries away from meaningful space travel. The idea that one could be standing in an advanced research laboratory, conducting cutting-edge science under a false identity, was supposed to be impossible. "That's not possible," Lyanna said, but her scientific mind was already working through the implications. "Humans don't have interstellar travel. They don't have the technology for biosynthetic disguises. They don't have a lot of things that the consortium thinks they don't have," I interrupted gently. "Lyanna, everything you've been told about humanity is wrong." She was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the same methodical approach she used for her research. "How long?" she asked finally. "How long what? How long have you been lying to me?" The question hit harder than I'd expected. 3 years. Since I arrived at this station. 3 years of working together. 3 years of sharing research, ideas, meals in the commissary. 3 years of me thinking I knew who you were. "You do know who I am," I said desperately. "I may not be Dr. Kethani of Altair 7, but everything else, the research, the conversations, the way I think about science, that's all real." "Is it? How do I know anything about you is real?" I reached up and began removing the remaining pieces of my disguise, the subcutaneous implants that altered my facial structure, the vocal modulators that changed my speech patterns. With each piece removed, I looked less like the colleague she'd known and more like myself. "Because," I said in my natural voice, "the person who's been excited about your discoveries, who's respected your work, who's—" I stopped myself before I said something that would make the situation even more complicated. "That person is real, Lyanna. That person is me." She stared at me, taking in my actual appearance for the first time. Human features, human bone structure, human eyes that showed too much emotion for someone trained in espionage. "You're really human," she said, wonder creeping into her voice alongside the suspicion. "I'm really human. But that means—" Her scientific mind was racing through the implications. "That means humans have technology the consortium doesn't know about. That means your species has been hiding its true capabilities." "Yes. For how long?" I met her eyes, those brilliant violet eyes that had been studying me without knowing what they were really seeing. "Long enough to know that revealing ourselves would be a mistake," I said. "Long enough to know that the galaxy isn't as ready for humanity as humanity is for the galaxy." Lyanna was quiet again, and I could practically see her reorganizing everything she thought she knew about interstellar politics, technological development, and the human species. "Dr. Kethani," she said finally, then corrected herself. "What's your real name?" Kai. Dr. Kai Thorne. Dr. Thorne, she said, testing the unfamiliar syllables. What exactly are you doing here? I looked at this brilliant woman who had just discovered that everything she thought she knew about one of the galaxy's species was wrong, and I made a decision that my training said was dangerous but my instinct said was necessary. Learning, I said. And preparing. Preparing for what? I moved to the laboratory's observation window, looking out at the alien landscape of Theta 7. For the day when humanity has to stop hiding and start participating in galactic affairs openly. For the day when we have to prove that intelligence and good intentions matter more than military might or technological intimidation. Lyanna joined me at the window, studying my profile the way she'd study a new species of plant. And what will that day look like? I don't know, I admitted. But I hope it looks like two scientists from different worlds working together because they trust each other, not because their governments told them to. She was quiet for several minutes, processing everything I'd told her. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Kai, what you're telling me changes everything I thought I knew about galactic politics. I know. It means the consortium has been operating under false assumptions about human capabilities for decades. I know. It means there might be other species out there hiding their true technological levels. There might be. She turned to look at me directly. And it means I have to decide what to do with this information. That was the question that would determine whether I'd just made the best decision of my career or signed humanity's death warrant. I looked into those violet eyes that had been scrutinizing Data all day and were now scrutinizing me with the same intensity. What are you going to do, Lyanna? She smiled, and for the first time since my contacts had failed, I felt like I could breathe again. I'm going to help you finish this research, she said. And then you're going to tell me everything. The commissary on Research Station Theta 7 was nearly empty during the late shift, which made it the perfect place for conversations that could reshape galactic politics. Lyanna sat across from me, her dinner untouched while she processed everything I'd told her about humanity's true technological capabilities. Quantum entanglement communication, she repeated, staring at her vegetable protein as if it might contain the secrets of the universe. You've had instantaneous galactic communication for 30 years. 32, actually, I said, taking a bite of what passed for nutrition in the outer systems. We started with limited range, but we've been talking to our colonies in the Andromeda spiral for over a decade. Andromeda? Lyanna looked up sharply. The consortium believes Andromeda is uninhabitable. The survey reports from 50 years ago concluded it was too unstable for colonization. Those were consortium surveys, I pointed out. Humanity had different criteria for habitability. She laughed, but it wasn't entirely humorous. Different criteria. Right. Because you're apparently capable of terraforming on a scale the rest of us consider impossible. Not impossible. Just expensive and time-consuming. Kai, you're describing technologies that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the galaxy. Why hide them? I set down my fork and looked at her seriously. Lyanna, what happens when a technologically advanced species makes contact with a less advanced one? Historically, the less advanced species either gets enslaved, exterminated, or absorbed into the more advanced civilization's empire. Exactly. Now imagine humanity revealed itself 50 years ago, when we were just developing interstellar travel. What do you think would have happened? Lyanna was quiet for a moment, her scientific mind working through the implications. The consortium would have classified you as a potential threat. They would have demanded access to your technologies, your worlds, your people. And when we refused, they would have declared you a hostile species and authorized preemptive action. So we chose to remain hidden until we were strong enough to reveal ourselves on our own terms. But now you are strong enough, Lyanna said. From what you're describing, humanity could probably defeat the consortium militarily. I shook my head. Military victory isn't the goal, Lyanna. Integration is. We want to be part of the galactic community, not conquer it. Then why the deception? Why send agents like you to infiltrate consortium institutions? Because we need to understand what we're integrating into, I explained. The official consortium histories, the public databases, the diplomatic records, they don't tell the whole story. We need to know how the galaxy really works before we can figure out how to fit into it. Lyanna pushed her food around on her plate, thinking. And what have you learned? That the galaxy is more complicated than either of our species realizes. That there are power structures and ancient agreements that shape everything from trade routes to research priorities. That the consortium isn't as unified as it appears, and that there are species within it who have their own hidden agendas. Including the Zephyrians? I don't know yet. That's part of what I'm trying to figure out. She looked at me with an expression that was part curiosity, part concern. Kai, what you're describing sounds like a massive intelligence operation. How many agents does humanity have placed throughout the galaxy? I can't tell you exact numbers, but we're not the only ones asking questions about how the galaxy really works. What do you mean? I hesitated, knowing that what I was about to tell her would complicate her worldview even further. Lyanna, have you ever wondered why certain research projects get approved while others are mysteriously shelved? Why some technological developments are celebrated while others are quietly discouraged? I've noticed inconsistencies in the consortium's research priorities, yes. I always assumed it was bureaucratic inefficiency. What if it wasn't inefficiency? What if it was policy? Lyanna's expression grew troubled. Policy to do what? To maintain technological stagnation. To keep member species dependent on consortium infrastructure and expertise. To prevent any single species from developing capabilities that might challenge the existing power structure. That's. She paused, processing the implications. That's a very serious accusation, Kai. It's also provable, if you know where to look. I pulled out my personal tablet, its human-manufactured components hidden inside a shell that looked like standard consortium technology. Tell me, Dar. Voss, what happened to the research into self-replicating materials that the Altarians were developing 15 years ago? It was deemed too dangerous for practical application. The Council for Technological Assessment concluded that self-replicating materials posed an unacceptable risk of uncontrolled propagation. And the Viridian experiments with consciousness transfer technology? Halted due to ethical concerns about the nature of individual identity. The Corvathian breakthrough in gravitational manipulation? Classified as potentially destabilizing to interstellar navigation systems. I showed her my tablet screen, where I'd pulled up classified documents that my contacts in human intelligence had obtained. Lyanna, every one of those projects was shut down not because of safety concerns, but because they represented threats to consortium control systems. She stared at the documents, her face pale. Where did you get these? Humanity has been very thorough in our research. We've learned to ask the right questions and look in the right places. These documents, if they're authentic, they prove that the consortium has been deliberately suppressing technological advancement for decades. Not suppressing. Controlling. They allow advancement in areas that strengthen their infrastructure while blocking development in areas that might allow member species to become truly independent. Lyanna was quiet for several minutes, reading through the classified files. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Kai, if this is true, it means my entire career has been built on a lie. It means the research I've dedicated my life to has been allowed to proceed only because it serves someone else's agenda. Not necessarily, I said gently. Your research into quantum crystalline structures. It's brilliant work that could genuinely help people. The fact that the consortium has ulterior motives doesn't diminish the value of what you're discovering. But it does mean that I can't trust the institutions I've worked with in my entire professional life. No, I agreed. It doesn't. She looked up from the tablet, meeting my eyes. How do you do it? How do you maintain your faith in science when you know how corrupted the system has become? Because science itself isn't corrupted, Liana. Discovery, understanding, the pursuit of knowledge, those things are pure regardless of who tries to control or manipulate them. Your excitement when you discovered those crystalline processing capabilities, that was real. That was science working the way it's supposed to work. Even though you already knew humans had developed similar technologies. Especially because of that. Your approach, your methods, your insights, they're different from ours. Better in some ways. You're discovering things we missed, asking questions we didn't think to ask. Liana smiled slightly. So even though humanity is apparently decades ahead of us technologically, you can still learn from Zephyrian research. Absolutely. That's why integration is so important, Liana. No single species has all the answers. We all see the universe differently, approach problems from different angles. When we work together, we achieve things none of us could accomplish alone. Is that what this is? She asked, gesturing between us. Integration. I felt my pulse quicken. What do you mean? I mean a human agent and a Zephyrian scientist, sharing classified information over dinner, planning to continue working together despite the fact that everything about this situation violates both of our species' security protocols. I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but I suppose it is. And it's working, isn't it? We've learned more about each other's capabilities and motivations in one evening than our governments have discovered in decades of intelligence gathering. It's definitely more efficient than traditional espionage. Liana laughed, and this time it was genuinely amused. More efficient and probably more dangerous. Do you realize what would happen if either of our superiors found out about this conversation? I've been trying not to think about that. Well, I've been thinking about little else, she said. And I've reached a conclusion. Which is? She leaned forward, lowering her voice. I think the reason this is working is because we trust each other. Not because we've been ordered to cooperate, not because we're following diplomatic protocols, but because we've chosen to trust each other based on our own judgment. That's a dangerous way to conduct interstellar relations. Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to conduct them honestly. I looked at this remarkable woman who had just had her entire worldview upended and was responding by doubling down on cooperation and trust. Liana, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that we continue this collaboration. You help me understand the real political situation in the galaxy, and I help you understand what Zephyrian science is really capable of when it's not being artificially limited by consortium policies. That would make us both traitors to our respective intelligence services. Or it would make us the first successful example of genuine interspecies cooperation in galactic history. I stared at her, amazed by her courage and horrified by the risks she was proposing. You're talking about creating an unauthorized diplomatic channel between our species. I'm talking about proving that your integration model could actually work. That two individuals from different worlds can work together effectively when they have complete honesty and mutual respect. And if we're caught? Then we'll be in trouble together, she said with a smile that was both brilliant and terrifying. But if we succeed, we might just change how the galaxy works. I looked around the empty commissary, at this woman who had become both a colleague and potentially something more dangerous, at a situation that was spiraling far beyond anything my training had prepared me for. Liana, I said finally, I think you might be right. About which part? All of it. The corruption, the suppression, the need for genuine cooperation. I paused, knowing that my next words would commit us both to a path that could lead to either unprecedented success or complete disaster. And about us. She reached across the table and took my hand. Then we're really doing this? We're really doing this. Good, she said. Because I have about 1,000 questions about human technology, and I suspect you have just as many about Zephyrian research capabilities. At least that many. Then we'd better get started. We have a galaxy to figure out. The alarm started at 0347 station time, jolting me awake with the kind of adrenaline surge that meant either equipment failure or unwanted visitors. Given that we were in the middle of classified research on a restricted moon, I was hoping for equipment failure. "Dr. Thorne," came Lionel's voice through my comm unit, using my real name in a way that immediately told me this wasn't a routine emergency. "We have a problem." I was already pulling on my uniform, muscle memory from 3 years of maintaining my cover taking over. "What kind of problem?" "The kind with consortium intelligence credentials and very specific questions about research station personnel." My blood went cold. "How many?" 3 ships. Full tactical configuration. They're requesting immediate docking clearance and a complete personnel roster. I activated my personal security protocols, uploading my research data to encrypted human networks and initializing the emergency identity reconstruction system that would hopefully restore my Altarian appearance if I could get to my quarters. "Liana, how much time do we have?" "Maybe 20 minutes before they dock. 30 if we're lucky and they follow standard approach procedures. Meet me in Lab 7. Bring everything we've discovered about the crystals and any personal research files you can't afford to lose." Lab 7 was the most isolated research facility on the station, with independent life support and communication systems that made it ideal for sensitive work. It was also equipped with emergency sterilization protocols that could eliminate evidence faster than traditional data wiping. I arrived to find Liana already transferring files, her movements efficient despite the obvious stress. "Kai, what exactly is Consortium Intelligence looking for?" "Probably me," I said, beginning my own data transfers. 3 years is a long time to maintain deep cover. Someone must have noticed inconsistencies in my background. "What kind of inconsistencies?" I activated the lab's privacy shields, creating an electromagnetic barrier that would block most surveillance equipment. Altarians have distinct metabolic patterns. Their sleep cycles are tied to specific stellar radiation frequencies. Their dietary requirements include trace minerals that are unique to their homeworld. "And you've been faking all of that?" "Not faking. Compensating. Human medical technology is sophisticated enough to modify our biochemistry temporarily, but it leaves signatures that careful analysis can detect." Liana stopped her file transfers and stared at me. "Kai, exactly how sophisticated is human medical technology?" "Sophisticated enough to keep me alive and undetected for 3 years. "Why?" "Because if you can modify human biochemistry to mimic other species, that implies capabilities that go far beyond what the consortium believes possible." "Liana, we don't have time for a full technological briefing. If consortium intelligence is here, we need to focus on maintaining our covers." "Our covers?" I looked at her seriously. "You've been helping me access classified databases for the past week. You've been sharing Zephyrian research with someone you now know is a human intelligence agent. If they're investigating me, they're going to investigate everyone I've been in contact with." The color drained from Liana's face. "Oh. I hadn't thought of that. Which is why we need to be very careful about how we handle this situation." The lab's communication system chimed with an incoming station-wide announcement: "All personnel report to designated assembly areas for routine security verification. This is a mandatory compliance procedure. Failure to report within 15 minutes will result in immediate detention." "Routine security verification," Liana said bitterly. "Is that what they're calling intelligence sweeps these days?" "Apparently." I finished my data transfers and began initializing the emergency sterilization protocols. "Liana, I need you to listen to me very carefully. When we go to that assembly, you've never had any personal relationship with Dr. Kethani of Altair 7. We've been colleagues, nothing more. Our interactions have been strictly professional. What about our research collaboration? Standard interdepartmental cooperation. You provided crystalline samples, I provided spectral analysis. Routine work with no special significance. And if they ask about our conversations? About the time we've spent together? I met her eyes, seeing the fear there and wishing I could offer more reassurance. Then you tell them the truth, but not the whole truth. We discussed research methodologies. We shared academic interests. We had professional conversations about crystalline structures and energy applications. What about everything else? What about what you've told me about humanity? About the consortium suppression policies? You've never heard any of that. Liana was quiet for a moment, processing the implications. Kai, if I deny everything, if I claim complete ignorance about your true identity and your species' capabilities, what happens to the cooperation we've been building? What happens to the trust? It survives, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it. Because the cooperation and trust were always about more than just sharing information. They were about choosing to see each other as individuals rather than representatives of our respective species. And you think that will be enough to get us through an intelligence investigation? I think it will have to be. The sterilization protocols finished running, leaving the lab completely clear of any evidence that we'd been conducting unauthorized research. As we prepared to leave for the assembly area, Liana caught my arm. Kai, what if they detect your biosynthetic modifications? What if your disguise fails under intensive scanning? Then I activate emergency protocols that will either restore my cover or... I paused, not wanting to finish that sentence. Or what? Or ensure that I can't be interrogated about human capabilities or the location of Earth. Liana stared at me in horror. You're talking about suicide protocols. I'm talking about worst-case contingencies that we hopefully won't need. Kai, you can't be serious. You can't throw away your life to protect information. I can and I will if necessary. Liana, if the consortium discovers the full extent of human technological advancement before humanity is ready for open contact, it could lead to a war that destroys both our species. Then we make sure they don't discover it, she said firmly. We maintain your cover, we get through this investigation, and we continue working toward the kind of integration you've been talking about. And how exactly do you propose we do that? Liana smiled, and I recognized the expression from our research sessions. It was the look she got when she was about to attempt something brilliant and dangerous. We give them a different mystery to solve, she said. What do you mean? I mean we make sure that consortium intelligence finds exactly what they expect to find, and nothing they don't expect to find. Before I could ask for clarification, the lab's door chimed with an incoming security override. We were out of time. Dr. Voss, Dr. Kethani, came a mechanical voice through the intercom, you are required to report immediately for security verification. Failure to comply will result in detention and interrogation. I looked at Liana, this brilliant woman who had just promised to help me deceive one of the most sophisticated intelligence organizations in the galaxy. Are you ready for this? I asked. No, she said. But I'm ready to try. We walked toward the door together, toward whatever waited for us in the security verification process, toward a test of whether the trust we'd built could survive the kind of scrutiny that had exposed countless other covert operations. As we stepped into the corridor and saw the armed consortium security personnel waiting for us, I realized that everything humanity had worked toward, everything we'd sacrificed to remain hidden until we were ready for contact, now depended on whether a Zephyrian scientist could convincingly lie to her own species' intelligence service. Dr. Voss, Dr. Kethani, said a figure in the distinctive black uniform of consortium intelligence, I am Officer Vex Korath. You will accompany me for routine questioning. Of course, Liana said smoothly. Though I hope this won't take too long. We have important research to complete. Officer Koratha's reptilian features showed no emotion, but I caught the way his cybernetic eye focused on me with what looked like particular interest. I'm sure your research can wait, Dr. Kethani, he said. After all, we wouldn't want anything to interfere with station security. As we were escorted toward the interrogation facilities, I couldn't help but wonder if this was how interstellar wars began, not with grand declarations or military movements, but with a single compromised intelligence agent and the people who chose to trust him despite every reason not to. The interrogation room was designed to be psychologically unsettling, with lighting that shifted subtly to keep subjects disoriented and chairs that were just uncomfortable enough to create low-level stress. Officer Vex Koroth sat across from me, his cybernetic enhancements making soft mechanical sounds as he reviewed files on his tablet. Dr. Kethani of Altair 7, he said without looking up. Molecular engineer, specializing in crystalline energy applications. 3 years of exemplary service at Research Station Theta 7. That's correct. Excellent academic credentials from the Altarian Science Consortium. Published researcher with 17 papers in peer-reviewed journals. Unmarried, no family connections outside your homeworld. All accurate. Karatha's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on me. Tell me, Dr. Kethani, what is the atmospheric composition of Altair 7? The question was designed to catch me off guard, testing knowledge that any native would know instinctively. Fortunately, I'd memorized every detail of my fictional homeworld years ago. 71% nitrogen, 22% oxygen, trace amounts of noble gases including argon and xenon. Higher humidity levels than most inhabited worlds due to our extensive ocean systems. And the primary protein source in traditional Altarian cuisine? Kelp-based proteins, supplemented with mineral extracts from deep-sea organisms. We have cultural taboos against consuming terrestrial animals. Koroth made notes on his tablet, occasionally glancing up to study my reactions. You've been working closely with Dr. Liana Voss on crystalline research. We've collaborated on several projects, yes. Her expertise in quantum structures complements my background in energy applications. How closely? I'm not sure I understand the question. Have your interactions with Dr. Voss been limited to professional collaboration, or have you developed a personal relationship? I felt my pulse quicken, but kept my expression neutral. Dr. Voss is a respected colleague. Our relationship has been entirely professional. No social interactions. No meals shared outside of official station functions. No private conversations unrelated to research. We've occasionally discussed academic interests during commissary meals. Nothing beyond normal collegial interaction. Karatha's mechanical eye made clicking sounds as it analyzed my responses. Dr. Kethani, are you familiar with the metabolic requirements of your species? Of course. Then you'll understand why our medical scanners detected anomalies in your biochemistry. My blood went cold, but I forced myself to remain calm. What kind of anomalies? Trace compounds that are inconsistent with Altarian physiology. Mineral signatures that suggest a different homeworld origin. Hormonal patterns that don't match your species' documented biology. This was it. 3 years of perfect cover, and it was coming apart because of medical technology one hadn't anticipated. I don't understand, I said, playing for time. I've never experienced any health issues that would suggest metabolic problems. Perhaps because you've been supplementing your diet with compounds designed to mask your true biochemistry. Koroth activated a holographic display showing detailed molecular analyses of my blood work. The evidence was damning, clearly showing the artificial modifications I'd been using to maintain my Altarian appearance. Dr. Kethani, or whoever you are, you have been systematically deceiving consortium security for 3 years. The question is why? I looked at the molecular evidence, at the cybernetic intelligence officer who had clearly spent considerable time preparing this interrogation, at the walls that suddenly felt much closer than they had moments before. Officer Koroth, I said carefully, I think there may be some misunderstanding about my medical history. What kind of misunderstanding? I am Altarian, but I wasn't born on Altair 7. I was born on one of the outer colonies, where the environmental conditions required significant medical intervention to ensure normal development. It was a desperate lie, but it was the kind of lie that might explain the biochemical anomalies without revealing my true species. Which colony? Altair 12. It was abandoned 15 years ago due to atmospheric instability. Convenient. A colony with no surviving records to verify your story. Officer Korath, if you're questioning my identity, I'm willing to undergo any additional testing you deem necessary. I have nothing to hide. That was a massive bluff, considering that intensive genetic analysis would immediately reveal that I wasn't even remotely Altarian. Korath studied me for several more minutes, his cybernetic enhancements processing information faster than organic intelligence could follow. Finally, he spoke. Dr. Kethani, there is one more matter we need to discuss. Our investigation has revealed that you've been accessing classified databases through unauthorized channels. I don't understand what you mean. Security logs show that someone has been using your credentials to access files related to technological suppression policies, historical research restrictions, and classified intelligence assessments of member species capabilities. My mind raced. Those were the files I'd shown Lyanna, the evidence of consortium manipulation that had convinced her to trust me. If they could trace that access to my credentials. Officer Korath, I can assure you that I have never accessed any classified databases beyond those necessary for my research. Then you won't mind if we examine your personal equipment for evidence of such access? Not at all. That was when the door opened and Lyanna walked in, escorted by 2 security officers. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said to Korath, but I believe there's been a misunderstanding about the database access. Korath's attention shifted to her. Dr. Voss. How exactly do you know about classified database access? Because I'm the one who accessed those files, using Dr. Kethani's credentials. I stared at her in shock. She was confessing to a crime she hadn't committed to protect me from a crime I had committed. Why would you use another researcher's credentials? Korath asked. Because my own access permissions weren't sufficient for the research I was conducting. I needed information about historical technology assessments to understand why certain crystalline applications had been restricted in the past. And Dr. Kethani gave you his credentials willingly? No. I obtained them through social engineering. I convinced him that I needed to cross-reference some technical specifications, and he provided his access codes without realizing what files I intended to examine. Lyanna was lying smoothly, creating a story that made me a victim of deception rather than a perpetrator of espionage. Dr. Voss, Korath said slowly, are you confessing to unauthorized access of classified intelligence files? I'm confessing to exceeding my research parameters in pursuit of scientific understanding. If that constitutes a security violation, then yes, I'm responsible for that violation. Korath looked between us, his mechanical eye analyzing our expressions and body language. Dr. Voss, why are you protecting Dr. Kethani? I'm not protecting him. I'm telling the truth about my own actions and accepting responsibility for my mistakes. Even though those mistakes could result in significant disciplinary action. Even though. I watched this remarkable woman sacrifice her career to protect my cover, and I felt something break inside me. The careful emotional distance I'd maintained, the professional boundaries that kept my mission objective, all of it crumbled as I realized what she was doing. Officer Korath, I said quietly, Dr. Voss is lying. Both Lyanna and Korath stared at me. I accessed those files. I've been conducting unauthorized research into consortium policies for months. Dr. Voss discovered my activities and confronted me about them, but she had no involvement in the original security breach. Kai, what are you doing? Lyanna whispered, using my real name without thinking. Korath's cybernetic eye focused on that slip with mechanical precision. Kai. I thought your name was Kethani. The interrogation room fell silent. In that moment, I realized that all our careful planning, all our attempts at deception, had been undone by a simple emotional reaction. Officer Korath, I said, standing up slowly, my name is Dr. Kai Thorne. I am a human intelligence agent, and I have been operating under false identity for 3 years. The silence that followed was deafening. You're human. Korath's voice carried a mixture of disbelief and fascination. That's impossible. Humans don't possess the technology for such sophisticated biological disguises. Humans possess a great many technologies that the consortium doesn't know about, I said, beginning to remove the remaining elements of my disguise. And it's time the galaxy learned about them. As my true features became visible, as my human eyes and bone structure emerged from behind 3 years of biosynthetic camouflage, I saw Karatha's expression change from suspicion to amazement. Dar. Voss, he said without taking his cybernetic eye off me, did you know what he was? Yes, Lyanna said quietly. I've known for 2 weeks. And you didn't report it? No. Why? Lyanna looked at me, then at Karath, then back at me. Because he's right. About the technological suppression, about the need for change, about the possibility of genuine cooperation between species. Because working with him has shown me what the galaxy could be like if we chose trust over fear. Karath was quiet for several minutes, processing this information. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. Dr. Thorne, you're claiming that humanity has been concealing advanced technologies while placing intelligence agents throughout consortium space. Yes. For how long? Long enough to understand how the galaxy really works. Long enough to know that revealing ourselves prematurely would have been catastrophic for both humanity and the existing galactic order. And now? I looked at Lyanna, at this woman who had risked everything to help me protect the secret that was no longer secret. Now we're ready to discuss what comes next. But we're going to discuss it as equals, not as subjects being interrogated by their superiors. Karatha's cybernetic enhancements hummed as he processed this unprecedented situation. Dr. Thorne, you realize that what you're describing could fundamentally alter galactic politics? That's the idea. And you believe that humanity is prepared for that level of change? I believe that the galaxy is prepared for it. The question is whether the consortium is prepared to accept that the universe is bigger and more complicated than their policies have assumed. Karath was quiet again, and I could practically see him weighing his options. He could arrest us both, report our conversation to his superiors, and trigger exactly the kind of crisis that humanity had been trying to avoid. Or he could become part of the solution. Dar. Voss, he said finally, do you truly believe that this human agent represents an opportunity for positive change rather than a threat to galactic security? I believe that the work we've done together has produced better results than either of our species has achieved independently. I believe that cooperation based on honesty and mutual respect is more effective than control based on deception and manipulation. Even if that cooperation challenges fundamental assumptions about how the galaxy should be organized. Especially then. Karath, the interrogation room was designed to be psychologically unsettling, with lighting that shifted subtly to keep subjects disoriented and chairs that were just uncomfortable enough to create low-level stress. Officer Vex Karath sat across from me, his cybernetic enhancements making soft mechanical sounds as he reviewed files on his tablet. Dr. Kethani of Altair 7, he said without looking up. Molecular engineer, specializing in crystalline energy applications. 3 years of exemplary service at Research Station Theta 7. That's correct. Excellent academic credentials from the Altarian Science Consortium. Published researcher with 17 papers in peer-reviewed journals. Unmarried, no family connections outside your homeworld. All accurate. Karatha's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on me. Tell me, Dr. Kethani, what is the atmospheric composition of Altair 7? The question was designed to catch me off guard, testing knowledge that any native would know instinctively. Fortunately, I'd memorized every detail of my fictional homeworld years ago. 71% nitrogen, 22% oxygen, trace amounts of noble gases including argon and xenon. Higher humidity levels than most inhabited worlds due to our extensive ocean systems. And the primary protein source in traditional Altarian cuisine? Kelp-based proteins, supplemented with mineral extracts from deep-sea organisms. We have cultural taboos against consuming terrestrial animals. Karath made notes on his tablet, occasionally glancing up to study my reactions. You've been working closely with Dr. Liana Voss on crystalline research. We've collaborated on several projects, yes. Her expertise in quantum structures complements my background in energy applications. How closely? I'm not sure I understand the question. Have your interactions with Dr. Voss been limited to professional collaboration, or have you developed a personal relationship? I felt my pulse quicken, but kept my expression neutral. Dr. Voss is a respected colleague. Our relationship has been entirely professional. No social interactions. No meals shared outside of official station functions. No private conversations unrelated to research. We've occasionally discussed academic interests during commissary meals. Nothing beyond normal collegial interaction.